Good morning, everybody. My name is Dominic. Thank you for joining us for our session on corporate dark arts. So, what are we going to be talking about today? This was the starting to our provocation of this lovely little journey of preparing this report. What is the CMO? Is it a role, or actually is it something different? What we had the pleasure of looking at is the fact that actually all these lovely titles, CMOs, CEOs, whatever it might be, it's never about the actual role or even the words within it. Our premise for doing this is because we were surrounded by a ton of different conversations that were occurring in the media that as a marketer, I was pretty fed up with. It was this constant declaration that the CMO was dead. Marketing didn't necessarily need a leader. The tenure of this role went from 10 years to 4 years. And to be totally honest, we wanted to call BS on it because this role to us is incredibly important. And so we wanted to dive a little deeper into exactly what was going on of why these people were declaring that this role is dead, because it's not. The CMO didn't lose power. It didn't even go extinct. Power evolved and changed shape. And actually, within this role, this is where all the change happens. This is where all the different nuances of what's going on in the market actually affects a corporation. And in fact, all of this change is going to affect the entirety of the C-suite. So the CMO is probably more adept to preparing for this particular future. So, what is actually going on? Now, if we did another one of those surveys that I'm sure you've all read, what are your priorities? Where are you going? What do you think the future's going to be? We didn't think we would actually get the results we were looking for. So we decided to do a report in a very different way. We decided to go at it with anonymity. So the best thing about doing interviews is always what happens prior. It's the conversations that are quote unquote off the record. It's the water cooler conversations of what you say when you're not mic'd. But just always remember, when you're not mic'd, that's when all the great conversations happen. So we wanted to document it and record it and actually use those insights as the way in which to craft what we can learn from what's going on. And so therefore the secret sauce was actually creating an environment that allowed the confession to happen. This idea of actually speaking your truth, the psychological safety that you have to allow you to truly express the details that you may not say out loud, but absolutely think. Those moments are the moments that drive behavior. Those moments are the moments that actually define how you might interpret what is in front of you. So we took on the privilege to be able to actually have conversations that were hidden, conversations with a great group of CMOs from all over the world. We spoke to CMOs that were leading their companies to great successes in many different industries: retail, finance, your regulated industries, and retail. And this particular study also brought us to CMOs all over the world to see actually were there anything different based on culture. So the premise of the study meant that we had to assemble a unique group of people to come together to put these insights. So before we get into the details, just a little introductions for us today. So we have Chrissy and Ree, who helped us put the document together. So if you get a chance and you want to connect with us, the QR code's there for you to download and read the report. We'll go over some headlines and actually get some guests out a little bit later to have a chat. But what was fun about this, of why we've called it Dark Arts, why you're seeing a report on taxonomy, it's really about human behavior and the instincts. And the beauty of that is it's driven by us. We control the narrative and we control how we tell stories. So actually, our inspiration came from, in fact, Ree's mother, who was an evolutionary biologist. And it was at that moment that we were like, oh, maybe we could actually define the species that make up the CMO industry. We have our fellow Brazilian here with us, with Gabe, who also helped together with me to actually conduct these conversations, and more importantly, to conduct these confessionals. So for myself even, the journey of it, when I reflected on my career, I've done a ton of different things, and if I actually wrote my resume out on a piece of paper, it probably looks like a series of identity crises. I've started very clearly wanting to become a cardiothoracic surgeon, went to med school, and then very much pivoted on a hard right over to business. Moved into everything from advertising, PR, product development, but I do have a confession to make. I never actually gave up my practice of medicine. I simply switched my scalpel and my stethoscope for a strategy deck. The beauty of actually looking at this is that if you let someone have that psychological safety and build that environment around them, their true instincts, the true observations are the ones that actually come out. And that actually is the premise of this particular report. So, before we get into those details, we're going to share with you some of these quotes, and we'll ask a couple of questions and do some hand raising to see how you feel. So, number one. There is a thing about marketing and creativity that is still a bit dark art and magic. I'm sure we've got a ton of either CMOs or future CMOs or other leaders. Who here actually agrees with this particular statement? Raise some hands. All right. So, other than dark arts, let's see what else we have. I love being able to predict what people are going to do. That's power. Who sees this in themselves? Okay, so I might avoid people over here. Next up, you can't say, are you an effing idiot? You have to go, well, it's like getting on a plane into the air, but if you stop fueling, you're going to come down. And they're like, oh, okay, I guess that's what marketing really is about. Who's had to actually say something like this to a fellow colleague? All right, might be avoiding some of those boardrooms there. Sometimes I need to market to my CEO the same way I market to customers, with emotion, not logic. I wonder if we've got some academic in the room that might actually disagree with that statement, but who here agrees with that statement? Okay. Actually, a lot of my wins came from stating the obvious. Things no one stopped to notice. Yeah. I feel like we've got some bad memories going on there. Subjectivity is not a flaw of the role. It's part of its very nature, and it's something every CMO has to learn to navigate and not eliminate. So that was interesting, because people might actually challenge that, but there's such spirit to the truth that the opposite might actually drive how you actually behave. Brand is dead. Like Jesus Christ is dead, it actually lives forever. Who believes that's true for marketing? I hope everyone in this room, because there is no way we are going to say that this role is dead. You're going to hear what this role's actually turned into next. You're creating the conditions for the organization to buy an idea. You're not selling idea. Who agrees with this? Or are we still trying to peddle those particular ideas? We're going to be able to learn exactly how we do this. So you have to understand that marketing is the lightning rod for every irrational thing a company does. Who's been that lightning rod and been struck a few times by those absurdities that a CFO might ask you? And I'm sorry if there are a couple of CFOs in the room, because I do see one or two. So, the last one we have for you, and probably my favorite and captures why I'm not in a suit. You want your CMO to be a little bit off. If you want a CMO in cufflinks, you're hiring the wrong guy. This particular quote actually came from one of my favorite conversations. In fact, this CMO not only it was a little cavalier, but actually told a lovely little story where it was like, well, I asked him, how do you know you've actually chosen the right job and are working with the right group of leaders in your organization? And his response was, well, you know you're working with the right CEO if they don't pull you after a bathroom while you're taking a... And it shows you the absurdities of actually what goes on into the corporate world. And actually it was this premise that led us to go, well, okay, what does and how has a CMO actually evolved? So, like I said, I never gave up my stethoscope. I'm still in marketing, and our inspiration with evolutionary biology will tell us that we are all descended from a single source of truth. Remember the days of the Don Draper CMO, that apex CMO that tells you what to do, and if you don't do it, you'll probably get in trouble. The push on authority, the way in which if I said it, that's what you do. A lot of these CMOs stemmed from that view of the world, but actually branched out into many different types of CMOs. What's interesting about what we were able to uncover is if you look a little bit deeper, you realize that actually not only are we not dead, not only are we not extinct, we've simply adapted and changed, and you have no idea that the CMO in front of you has actually done that. And we have a lot to learn from those adaptations, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So, if you get to download the report, and we'll go through a couple of these species cards today, is a little bit of this structure that gives you a sense of where these CMOs came from, their ancestry, so to speak. What were those genetic traits that they adapted and evolved, and what did they switch out? We've got a little cheat sheet for you at the bottom there on the adaptive traits. So the special source and the new genetic programming these CMOs have actually adopted to be successful. Little tips on how you might observe them in the wild, but more importantly, a few more little quotes to have a giggle to see, what's really actually going on. So what is the new taxonomy of corporate power? It's a ton of different species. We've got 5 to go through. We've actually got a typing tool for you. So the fun of doing these things, especially if you think about behavioral science, is you could probably code it into a couple of key questions to see where you are. Although we've done it as taxonomy, it's not actually about identifying exactly who or which species you are. It's creating that shared language so you can express what your adaptive traits are, but also recognize the different traits of a CMO amongst your colleagues or even other leaders so that you know how to respond. So a new CMO species is actually not, for us, a personality type. It's just simply identifying those superpowers, those things that are unspoken that make you go, oh, I didn't realize that person was doing that. My favorite one is when you hear people say, oh, if you really want to convince them what to do, you need to make sure you think it's their idea. How do you actually do that? So that's an invisible trait that you can actually use in adaptation. So we're going to go through a couple of these. The first one is the chief missing officer. So don't think this one is completely silent and quiet. They're your silent assassin. They use their invisibility, their ability to adapt and pivot and substitute where others are not necessarily showing up in the conversations in a way that actually makes you go, oh, that role wasn't fulfilled and someone stood up to do so. So a missing officer actually is one of the ones that would go, was that your idea or was that my idea? And you don't really even know whose idea was it. That's the power of the chief missing officer. They are invisible in their influence. These people aren't about the classic Don Draper authority. They don't flex just that single muscle. They in fact flex a secondary muscle, that is the muscle of influence, but more importantly, they actually flex the muscle of adaptivity. They have the ability to sub in where those gaps are. They have the ability to actually challenge and think about co-creation in a different way. They have the ability to adjust and actually help an organization see things that they actually didn't, and you have no idea that that is going on. So, we've got another one over here, the Chief Mutiny Officer. This is your classic disruptor. A person that wants to come in, change, razzle, dazzle, surprise you, hit you over the head and go, well, we're not doing that. These are the people who sees their job slightly different. My job isn't to steady the ship. It's to stir up what's gone stagnant. These are the people that will take on different challenges, do pilots and testing. Their ability to actually be insubordinate is strategy. It's not personality. They use the ability to challenge norms, to play devil's advocate in a way that sparks a different kind of collaboration. The third species we have for you today, the Chief Momentum Officer. These use the power of speed and not the Tom Cruise style. This is the kind of CMO that actually uses time and tempo in a way that actually gets you to go a little bit faster, run a sprint, do a few test pilots. Speed isn't the secret, timing is. The ability to know when to test, when to pivot, when to argue, and when to keep your mouth shut. These people have a great ability to actually then drive change, but if you think about what that particular kind of style or personality might be, a little different to our Chief Mood Officer. These are probably going to be all Gen Zs in the future because they know how to control a vibe. They know how to create an environment, an invisible environment of emotion that sets you up to maybe say things that you didn't think you wanted to say, set you up to think and smile and laugh and actually use mood, emotion, and energy to think about things differently. These are the CMOs that create the environment, not necessarily just give you the answer. I don't just push decisions. I adjust the mood until the decision pushes itself. True power of influence. Our next one is the Chief Meaning Officer. So this one is turning out to be quite popular because I think a lot of people who come into marketing actually choose it because they believe in purpose. But this one isn't actually just defining purpose. It actually takes it and adopts it internally and allows the CMO to actually start to think about things differently. I win arguments by stating things so obvious that everyone's too embarrassed to disagree with. Powerful little trick to actually adopt. You'll see that they actually show up in different ways. They combine both data and actually meaning. They give you a mantra. They rally the troops. They actually use pride and motivation as the ability to create change. They use pride and motivation as their way to argue. You might be raging, but if you talk to a Chief Meaning Officer, they have the ability to calm you down, make you think twice about what you're trying to say and achieve, and actually give you a new sense of direction to go on board with them. That's the power of a meaning officer. And actually, it's one of the really fun particular profiles. And that's why we are going to actually start with our meaning officers. So today, I'm going to welcome our two fabulous guests, Michelle and Melissa, both wonderful CMOs, great female leaders, and also both Chief Meaning Officers. Welcome, ladies. Thank you. So let's, we'll do some introductions, hope people get to know you. So would you like to introduce yourself, Melissa?
I would love to. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Grady Diaz. I am now at a healthcare company called Measured Wellness, and I was most recently the CMO of Cadillac for about 7 years. Very excited to be here and have this conversation with you all.
Fantastic. I'm Michelle Peterson. I'm the CMO of Kendra Scott, and you're welcome to our hometown. And I've been there for about 4.5 years.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to start the conversation a little bit about the species of the Chief Meaning Officers, since the both of you actually typed this particular one. So the first question for you is actually thinking of these particular traits. So if someone in the audience actually wanted to mimic your special powers, your ability to be a Chief Meaning Officer, what actually would they be mimicking?
Go ahead. All right, so I think one of the most important things that you can do as a marketer is bring the voice of the customer and bring stories into meetings. So by having those stories ready, it really brings your point to life. I'm a very heavy data person. I lean into data a lot, but I love to bring that data to life with human stories. And by doing that and having that voice in the room, as you were saying, to say something so obvious they can't argue. If it comes from the customer's mouth, it's really hard to argue with. So have those stories that really bring it to life at the ready.
That's great. I love that. I always feel like you can't argue about the consumer when you finally like bring her into the room. Then everybody's aware of who that consumer is. First of all, I'm thrilled to be here, and I think I wanted to share two things. One is when I learned more and more about the study, I think what was a mind shift for me was, yes, this is about marketing and CMOs, but it's really about leadership. So I think anyone in any position can get incredible learnings from this study because it's truly about leadership skills, which to me is like such a missing capability in organizations, how important leadership is. So to me, as a chief meeting officer, you talked a little bit about superpowers. And I think one of my superpowers is the ability to listen. And I'm like shocked how rare that is in most boardrooms and most conference rooms. Like to your point, you can't tell a story about a consumer that you haven't listened to. And I'm rare, when I work with my team, like I'm rarely the expert in the room. I have creatives and PR experts and brand experts. But what I can do is really listen and ask the right question and ask the next question. And that usually uncovers better insights than being the loudest person in the room. So I think listening is the way to bring it to life.
Have you ever been challenged by a very loud person in the boardroom?
Yes.
How did that go down?
Definitely. But sometimes, those people are also just as interesting. My team always says to me that one of my most common statements is like, tell me more. And even when somebody is loud and has so much to say and you say, tell me more, they're also like a little bit taken aback because they're not used to kind of maybe in that case digging deeper or kind of sharing more insights. So I think those insights come from anyone in the room.
Amazing. So one of the things we're going to, just to frame the conversation is, as Michelle had actually said, all of this isn't actually about a particular type. It's really about how you use the different adaptive traits. And when you think about these struggles that CMOs might have with either the boardroom or the market, it really is actually about corporate influence. So how do you actually usher change the conversation, get people to your side? All of this is about influence. So we put together kind of 3 rules of power. When you're thinking about the corporate boardroom, there are 3 things that we really think if you show up, and there are many different ways to express this, it gives you a unique power to actually change the conversation and to get back control. So the 3 rules of power: adaptation beats dominance, soft power builds hard results, and absurd friction fuels traction, which is going to be my favorite. So let's talk about the first one. Adaptation beats dominance. So when we're thinking about the sentiment of adaptation, so this comes back to originally leaders always think about the muscle of authority. That's how you create change, tell someone what to do. Then came the days of the muscle of influence. You actually have to whisper in someone's ear. Now, the true trait, most powerful, muscle of adaptivity, that brain muscle that actually allows you to actually change and adjust. So I'm interested to hear with the panel, what behaviors made you successful earlier in your career, but actually had the power to not just change you, but also move the CEO?
Yeah, I think, and as I look at what made me successful earlier in my career and how that changed as I moved up through the ranks, it's a very, very different thing. When you are early in your career, your job is to get the job done and to kick ass doing it. That's what you have to do, and that's how you're going to move forward. The more you move up in leadership, there's a big shift, and it was hard for me early in my career as I started moving into those new roles to understand that my job was no longer kicking ass. It's just not. And so I think that if I reflect on when did I start becoming more successful in different things and what really helped me grow, it's understanding the shift that's happening in your job. The higher that you go in leadership, the more your job shifts from doing to teaching and inspiring. And whether you're doing that with your teams or whether you're doing that with the C-suite, it's really, really important. And I think that as marketers, our job as marketers is to understand data, understand trends, understand who people are, really get to human insight. Human insight is what drives good creative, good programs, good customer experiences, understanding how we touch people. Use those same skills in the boardroom, in the C-suite. Those are the skills. Still know your shit. You don't have to kick ass anymore, but know it. Have all the data, have the facts, but use the insight and use human understanding to convince people. And I think it's so important that we tell the stories and we bring people along. And the other thing that I've really learned, especially now moving from more junior leadership or like other leadership into the C-suite, that I've really learned is, which was something I wish I had done more early in my career, put on the hat of everyone else. Pretend you're the CFO. Mm-hmm. I found out that I've always had, they say, become buddies with the CFO, be friends. I'm a data person. I have always been friends with the CFO. We were speaking very similar languages, but there were some translation issues. And when you put on the hat of the CFO, what are they measuring? And how do you align to that? If you're talking to HR, what's important in HR? To the CEO, what is important to the CEO? They do love good marketing, but look at what's happening in their day and what you're doing. And I think that having that empathy and insight, all backed by data, is really what's going to give you the ability to be able to teach and inspire across the organization.
And also to influence. Like sometimes I wonder if at earlier levels in my career, if that was just as critical and I just didn't know it then, to translate marketing into those functions, right?
I mean, we had one of the CMOs tell this little story about where she came from to be able to learn how to actually adapt with the different characters in the boardroom. So this particular CMO was actually from Dubai. And we were talking about her career and where she came from. And I was like, okay, so what was your path to being a CMO? And started in agency in a very creative space. And it's like, well, what did you learn? She said, I learned how to be bossed around as an agency person. And then she made the comment that actually in Dubai, so many people get raised by nannies. And then they become leaders. And if you've been raised by a nanny, you've learn how to boss, not be bossed. So actually, the biggest skills that she learned was the ability to actually digest conflict, the ability to understand that sometimes that conflict isn't an objection. It's a request for more information. It's the ability to go, oh, okay, this is where they're coming from. So her big tip was, if you really want to be a great leader, don't just be bossy. Try and get bossed around and see how you feel.
It's good practice, right? Be the youngest in a family. I felt like the most important shift in my career was in leadership. I spent the first half of my career at General Mills, building brands, big company, and we did tons of leadership assessments and personality assessments for the whole first half of my career. And I felt like it was very internal. I knew everything about myself, how I lead, how I like to lead, what my leadership pet peeves are. We did leadership assimilations where we told our team everything about ourselves and how we lead. And what I eventually learned is that the best leaders don't lead the way they want to. They lead the way their team needs them to. Yeah. And it sounds very obvious, but it's hard. It's hard to know those things about yourself and then to adapt your leadership. And to me, that's the most important part of those personality assessments. I have a creative team, I have a growth marketing team, I have a regional marketing team, and all of those groups and leaders need to be led in different ways. And the most fun part of my day is trying to adapt my leadership style to that.
I love what you just said, and I think that's one of the things is we've been talking about the tool and understanding our type, and we were having this conversation. understanding that we're a chief meeting officer at our core, but when do we need to bring out those other personalities? When do you like read the room, and when do you need to be the mutiny officer? Or when is that going to really harm what you're trying to do and you need to be the momentum officer? So understanding those and being able to really read a room, I think that's been the most useful thing for me about this tool so far.
We should, on all of these tools, we should spend more time on the profile we aren't, because like I'm fairly good at being my profile. It's when I have to adapt to those others that the learning happens.
Absolutely. And
Lessons in mutiny. I can't wait to take it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I don't know how
So
well I'll
I'm
deliver
curious,
on that
Michelle,
one.
you talked about like the idea of meta-reflection and understanding yourself. In your career, was there ever a moment that what you learnt about who you were surprised you in a way, where you then doubled down on going, well, how might I pivot?
Well, lots of times when I've taken those personality tests, and I think it maybe happened in this one because we had
This
to
is
do
the Cosmo quiz.
Yeah, we had to do like the follow-up question and the follow-up question to kind of really define where I am. I tend to end up in the middle. Introvert and extrovert, I'm kind of a little bit of both, all the Myers-Briggs, all the leadership tests. And at times that frustrated me because when you say, okay, this group go to this side of the room and that group go to that side of the room, I was kind of always in the middle and felt almost a little undefined. But what I realized was, again, my superpower is that I can flex my leadership for what I need. And I think that's why I love being a CMO, because you do have, and chief meeting officer, because you're threading all of this data into telling a really human story. And that's why I got into marketing, because I loved engineering and I loved psychology and I wanted the ability to bring those together.
I mean, that in itself is great coming from that background, which is why I still believe I haven't given up my scalpel.
That's right.
I'll choose scalpel over a stethoscope.
Right, just in a different way. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is there a situation that you've been in when you've gone into that boardroom and actually your plan had to go to the side because you realized those characters in front of you were about to give you the challenge that you already predicted? So how did you adjust?
100%. And I think sometimes before going into those situations, I drive myself a little crazy over preparing. Like if I have 10 slides I'm presenting, I have 40 in the backup. I like to, I guess it's funny, it's another helpful trait. I'm a little bit argumentative and competitive by nature. So I love to argue with myself, and I also love to challenge my teams to argue with me. I always say, the one thing you are not allowed to ever say is you're sitting in the back of the room and saying, I knew it. If you knew it,
That's great.
Tell me. And I have this conversation with my team. If you have other people argue with you beforehand and play devil's advocate, you're more prepared. So I probably drive myself and everyone else a little crazy with that over preparation, but I have 100% been in that situation. And for me, that preparedness gives me the confidence to say, I hear what you're saying. Actually, let me pull this up. Here's the situation. I think the worst thing that you can do in that situation, whether you have the preparation or not, whether you have the slides or not, is to keep having the conversation when you see the room is dead. And whether that is a pause and have a tell me more moment without tell me more. Tell me what you're like, how is this? What do you think? To get it out, because to your point of sometimes having people think it's their idea, if you draw it out when you see the argument and exactly what you were saying, if someone comes at you and you're like, tell me more, which I, younger in my career, was very, very bad at. Very bad.
Yeah.
And I really learned over time how that power can shift and be influential. And then, I like people joke about my computer brain. Like, I see your computer brain going. Like, then I can use it to be my superpower and not my super enemy of like, let me give you facts, when like facts are absolutely not going to win the argument. So.
So over to the room, that topic about preparation, so forced choice. Do you always have a plan B, or do you go into the boardroom with just plan A? So who here in the room are plan B people? And our plan A people? And I don't give a S about anything people? I mean, it's really interesting because when you ask psychologists about what the power, should you have plan A's or plan B's, it actually speaks much more to how your brain operates. So some people go, you should have a plan B because you don't kind of know where things could go. But some people say if you're a plan B person, you might sell your plan A short. So even with that, it might be a forced choice, but the power is adaptability of knowing when you should use your plan B, when you actually, to Melissa's point, use the plan B to simply prep and project, to cycle through what the options are. It's not that you're actually preparing for a plan B. You're actually just using that to help you better sell your plan A.
I was just going to say, like, usually for me, it's not a plan B. It's like, how do I use this to say, don't worry, I've thought about that, and here's how we ended up here, versus, I probably sometimes die on my sword a little bit too much, but
Oh, so tell me more.
I think that there's a lot of times when I'm a very flexible person, and I love to listen to what everyone has to say, and I love to take in everything. But once I hold something as a core belief, I will say to the CEO, the CFO, or whoever it may be, this is really how I believe, and I speak up about it. And I think that it's something that, again, as I'm learning and growing, sometimes, and I think it's very important. In a moment, if you're feeling very emotional, is probably the moment to not speak. To just take a minute and say, I hear what you're saying. Let me like think that through and get back to you, versus, because if I'm coming from emotion, the person across from me is also probably coming from emotion, and we're gonna spiral up, not spiral down.
There's a mindfulness principle that I try to remind myself of, which is like, have your opinion and hold it lightly, but hold your principles tightly. And for me, if I have an opinion and I lean in on it, like, I won't back down. So I have to remember, like, have your opinion and hold it lightly, but obviously your principles have a line to them.
So on that note, how do you know when to push versus when to actually pull back?
Right. So I feel like I've thought about that a lot, actually, particularly in this prep, but just in general in business, and have gone through multiple, frameworks and criteria on how I know that. And I think, coming back to mindfulness, actually, I think ultimately, like, your gut knows when you're going against your principles. Yes. And we're constantly in leadership and in, corporate, we're constantly on the hamster wheel where you don't stop and listen, which was point one of my superpower, but also, and really kind of assess where you are and what you're feeling. Your gut knows when you're going against your principles. Like, you don't need a framework or your mind to know when to push on something or when to back down.
Marketers do like a framework, so breaking that habit might be a little more difficult.
But still, when you're like, oh, I was wrong. I held that too tightly and I should back down. Yeah.
I mean, mindfulness is so clear, just breathing. People go like, count to 3, and you think it takes forever. Like 30 minutes have gone by, but it's only just been 3 seconds. Mm-hmm. And that 3 seconds really does allow your brain to reprogram itself.
Yeah. So the company I'm at now, Measured Wellness, which is run by a doctor and clinical, one of the things that we look at, because we're very into wearable and continuous health data, is understanding the physiology of what breath work does. Uh-huh. And it actually, we watch as people do breath work, what happens to their HRV, what happens to their heart rate, and what happens to the stress level as it's measured like through an Oura Ring or Apple Watch. And it is actually medically happening. So wow. It is really important. Like, I do, you said count to 3, but I do box breathing. Mm-hmm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mm-hmm. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. It's the holding your breath.
Yeah.
Right.
It literally resets your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're like, wow, I haven't breathed in my belly for quite a bit. Let me reset.
But that it can get sort of woo-woo, but that's part of leadership, is being present, having empathy. It drives innovation, it drives creativity, and it's such a lost skill, I think, to be present and listen.
That's partly why Rule 2 exists, so thank you for transitioning for me.
Good transition.
What Michelle just described as soft power. It's how you use those smaller moments, how you might actually build influence. It's about understanding. It's about slowing down. It's about being able to actually get into the minds of the person that you see. At the end of the day, we're all humans. We're really not that different. And we all want things, we all have different desires. But actually, soft power in the corporate world is something that's pretty under-indexed. So the opening question here we have for the panel. When you're looking at leadership, a leadership situation where authority is fragmented and the remit is unclear, do you view it as an opportunity or is it actually a minefield?
I think a little bit of both, but mostly an opportunity because I think marketers are made for that type of situation because we're all about influencing consumer behavior and therefore influencing behavior in corporation. We had a period of time at Kendra Scott where we didn't have a CEO role and Kendra was the CEO for that period of time. And it was this amazing opportunity to like operate as a fantastic leadership team. And for those who had strengths in different areas to be able to step up and influence the group. And I loved it because I learned the areas where I tend to lean in, obviously on the marketing side, but also on strategy and vision. Those are the things that I absolutely love. I also learned that it's hard when there isn't a decision maker in the room. Like ultimately you need that decision maker or else things, take longer. So I kind of experienced both of those pieces during that time.
I love to jump into a minefield. It's probably I've been blown
What's
up
your
a few
favorite
times.
minefield you've encountered?
I think there's been a few, I think, as I'm going into new jobs where there's a minefield that maybe I didn't even know I was stepping into or something that I didn't understand. One of my favorite times was actually coming into my job at Motorola. I was brought in to build out a global CRM program. This was a very long time ago. And I was coming from automotive where there's a lot of data and I was excited to get in and jump in and figure it out. And on day one, I said, okay, give me the data. Let me start looking. I'm ready. And someone emailed me a spreadsheet from a web form. And I said, okay, first of all, we never email any customer data. So let's just take that out. This was a long time ago. And I found out that there was no database and that I was actually going to have to win all of that data from customers opting into programs, building things out that would create value. And it was a challenge and a mind, and there's, carrier relationships, there's customers, there's different parts of the organization. But I love a good challenge and I'm very proud, as we got to the sort of end of my tenure in that program, we had built that database out to 38 million people. All one through figuring out different programs, building stuff into the phone, much like Apple has, and having customers give information. And then we launched an e-commerce program. I think when I started my job at Cadillac, it was a similar thing. On the third day of my job, they announced that we were moving from Soho, New York, where I live, to Detroit. And I had to rebuild the whole team without knowing it. And those times are you're like, oh, what did I get myself into? But for me, it's a battle cry and I jump in and I will do what I have to push forward and get it done.
So one of the topics about soft power that people seem to always compare it to is the dark side, manipulation. So soft power versus manipulation, how do you see the difference?
I feel like this is a marketing question overall, right? So you understand human insight. Are you going to use it for good or for evil? And it goes down to your principles, I think, right? You've got to, I think, especially as we move into some of the things that the tools we have, AI, et cetera, in the world, leaning into our principles, who we are as people and how we lead teams is going to be what helps us to not get into that dark space.
One of my favorite things that came up was just like the nuances of it, right? Like the balance or the line is so close. And one of the CMOs said when it came to soft power, it is about it's about alignment, not agreement. And actually, you don't need to hold yourself to that black and white. When you just loosen up a little bit, you actually see the hidden agenda. And when you start to all align, you may eventually actually agree, but you don't need the agreement to actually kick off change.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So rule number 3. Absurd friction fuels traction. So one of the earlier quotes we had, that the marketing department is the lightning rod for absurdity. This is the battleground when you get into the boardroom where we always seem to pick on the CFO. We might pick on the CEO instead, who just fundamentally doesn't understand what marketing actually is and what they do. So I'm interested to get to story time about the most absurd situation you may have encountered. What did you learn and how did you navigate that?
That's a great question. So I feel like in marketing, because it's so visible, I had a previous boss who used to say like marketing is at the tip of the spear, and it's true. Because it's so visible, everybody has a perspective on it or a comment or an idea, or thinks they're an influencer, and has feedback on your marketing. And I've probably in both of our careers, we've heard it all. I've specifically in Kendra Scott, gotten feedback on times of the day that we need to send our emails, which is like ridiculous, and the color of whatever that the model should be wearing in the campaign shoot, all of those things that aren't going to make a difference. But what I learned when I get that feedback, probably early in my career, I was snarky and maybe didn't listen to it so well. And what I've transitioned sort of my mindset and my listening to is to try to get that person to articulate what is the objective you're trying to achieve. Yes. Because even as marketers, that's the way we should be giving feedback, or as a leader, that's the way I should be giving feedback. Not, I don't like that content in the store, but hey, this campaign is about joy and the joy that Kendra feels when the season transitions into spring, and I don't feel that joy throughout our marketing. That empowers my team and allows them to come up with many more solutions than I would have come up with, and ends up with a better outcome. So I tend to do that, particularly with my peers. Like, okay, we need that email sent at 6 a.m. and not 7 a.m. on Black Friday. Okay, what are you trying to achieve? Well, what I'm trying to achieve is we have not a GWP. I can't think of the word. Anyway, we have a GWP we're giving consumers, and we aren't giving them enough time to know that's happening. Okay, well, there's a million solutions for that. I can do an SMS. I can do paid media. I can shift things to days before. I can do a reveal. There's like 1,000 ways I can achieve that versus the tactic that you gave me. So I feel like it's not on me to judge the feedback. It's on me to reframe it to, what objective are you trying to achieve? Do I agree with the objective? Okay, if I do, then let's task the team with that objective.
That's a great way to frame things. Same thing. I feel like if you focus on outcomes and you ask the question, exactly,
right.
Yeah. When you just reframe something, what's the outcome we're trying to drive? That will help reframe the conversation. And if you shift the conversation to that and back it up by data, or strategic thoughts or whatever it is, when someone's focusing on a tactic or when something feels different, I think it is interesting, the feedback that you get. I think in a lot of my jobs, one of the things as marketers we really know is that emotion is what drives brand preference, what drives purchase. And even the people who are telling you to not be so emotional are driven by their own emotions. And like, what's that? One of my favorite things that Seth Matlin's posts a few times a year is, he said, it's a bunch of finance bros invest saying, I don't know what I don't know why we want to focus on brand as they look at their Rolex that tells the time as well as a Seiko. And so but how do you tell that to someone? How do you convey that? And it is that line that you have to walk, and somehow using a lot of the soft power, get people to see what really drives human choice and behavior.
I had a boss who always used to say, 2 smart people never disagree on a good idea. They disagree on the assumptions. And that's what I always come back to. Okay, we're having this conflict. What assumptions are you making that are different than the ones I'm making? Because it's much easier for us to debate that than to debate, is this great marketing content?
I mean, one of my favorite quotes in the report was that marketers lead in the messy world.
Yes. Well, we lead in the human world. So, of course, it's messy, right? It has to be.
So what's something that you've learned in kind of cleaning up that mess that you would want to tell your former boss that was in that situation so they can do better next time?
Yeah. I think it goes back to the same thing we've been talking about. When there's a mess, there's likely human emotion. There's reactions that are happening. And go back to the skills that we have as marketers.
Okay.
Understand what the truths are and understand the insight of the people. Look at your C-suite or whoever it is as your customers. What's the insight? What's driving their behavior? And how do you bring it back to the logical facts?
When you said go back to your skills, that resonates with me, because marketing is about taking human insight, which is incredibly messy, and simplifying it and articulating it. At Kendra Scott, Kendra has a saying, which I'll get to at the end of the story, which really aligns the company. She had this belief that if she connected with people, eventually she would sell something. That connection was first. And so when she started the company, she met everyone in the community. She met whoever came into her store and connected with them. She gave away a lot of products. She sampled, she gave to organizations, to nonprofits, and that essentially was her marketing plan. And as we got bigger, we did a little bit less than that. And she kept trying to say, it's about the experience. It's about like meeting people where you are. And I think that concept was still sort of complex for the organization. And she started to say connection before transaction. And she just simplified it to this very not messy, clean, memorable approach. And now you hear it everywhere in the company. Connection before transaction, from the retail employee to Kendra to the marketing department. We all know that's the focus and the mantra. And I think that's a great example of how to make messy things super simple. And that's what we do in marketing, right? That's why there's the invention of the tagline, because it makes it very simple. Consumers spend 2 seconds on our brand.
Spoken by a true meaning officer.
Yes.
The power of the mantra.
Yep.
All right. So I think one of the things that this study gave us as a final takeaway is a wonderful premise that marketing actually always leads the way. We get subjected to change. Leaders need to be paying attention. It's not that the role has changed. We've just gone underground with different adaptive traits. And actually, if you observe your CMOs who are succeeding, you learn these little ways to adapt how you build human rapport, how you negotiate, how you change the world around you. And it's really important, I think, as an industry for us to remember, roles will always change, but actually people are the ones that drive that. And if you are embracing those different techniques, you're able to actually have that shared language, which is why I think we're all here at South by. It's one of those wonderful places. You learn those mantras, you learn those little ways to adapt. So I would love for all of you to get on that website, do the typing tool. It'd be great to see how you guys have actually typed yourself. If you wanted to connect with the team, if you've got all the information in the QR codes, you can come find us. Little bit of housekeeping before we wrap up. If you do like the session, please put your feedback in. And if you don't and you want us to improve, do that too. But thank you very much for the panel discussion today. To give you a little navigation, you'll find we've got a little cheat sheet of all the different adaptations that are in there, and it'll be great to play around with it, see where you type. But we do have a couple minutes for any questions. If anyone's we've got the mic that's standing. If anyone has any questions for Michelle or Melissa. No? Oh, yeah. So the question is, what are the capabilities we should be looking in a CMO when you're trying to bring one on?
I think
Chief meeting officer.
Find a chief meeting officer.
obviously chief meeting officer.
You could put the typing tool in the interview guide.
Yeah. I think it's really important to understand and maybe lean into the study and see where you are. But there are different things that you need at different times. So do you need a chief meeting officer, someone who's going to come in and tell the story to the employees, to if you're looking for investors, to the companies that you're selling to? Do you need a mutiny officer because things are about to change and you need someone who's going to thrive in that? Or are you looking for momentum? I think clearly articulating what does success for our company look like in 3 years? And then what are we going to need to do to get there? Then the skills will just be it'll become obvious, yeah.
Hi. So you talk about adaptability a lot. How do you think your jobs are going to be affected by AI?
Oh, good question. Do we know?
Yeah, I mean, I get that question a lot, and I think the answer is who knows? I mean, who can imagine what it looks like? For me, it's more important in the here and now that we're how am I as a leader and how is my team testing those tools, adapting to those tools, being immersed in those tools, and kind of constantly driving and adapting. And I think that's probably more accurate than me saying in a year or 2 years or 3 years, here's what it's going to look like, because who knows?
I totally agree. I think the biggest thing that we need to be looking at across organizations, or as you're looking at bringing it in somewhere, is blank, clean sheet of paper. And there's a lot of times when people say that, but this is one of those times where it's if I was really going to do this differently, what would that look like? And what are the things that are repetitive that really annoy people? What are the things that could be done faster? What do we need more of? What do we need less of? And I think that will be how it'll define. And I think that it's going to take us all a while to catch up to capabilities anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question.
Last question.
Hi. You guys said a lot about leadership, and one thing I struggle with as a CMO of a financial service company in Brazil is that I have to lead a group of a team with different generations in it. So Gen Z, very junior. I'm 33, but I lead people that are older than me. And you guys said a lot about leadership skills and how you talk to your team, but any advice when you shouldn't be talking to your team the same way, because each people, Gen Z is a little bit more sensitive. Sometimes when you're leading someone older, you have to be a little bit more respectful, so they don't get. So any tips on that?
Yeah, great. I think the best way to figure that out is not so much generationally, but spending time with each of those people and asking them those types of questions. What motivates you? Where do you want to go? Why do you want to go in that direction? What type of leadership motivates you? And typically, I think you get the richness there and can then adapt your leadership style. So that's what I find kind of yes, those generational things often apply, but putting that to the side and human to human, having a discussion around how can I connect with you and how can I motivate you as the best leader, and taking that in and adapting.
It's treating everyone as human beings.
Yeah.
That's
As we do as leaders.
any parents in the room, if you have a 2-year-old toddler screaming at you, you don't keep standing up and telling them, oh, you can't do that. Parents immediately crouch down and get on their level first. So tip number 1 is to get on that same page and then go from there. Don't assume.
Yes, as a mom of twins, I know that. Like, I've parented them the exact same and they're completely different. And so you learn we say we have individual development plans in my house as parents. Like, we parent everyone differently.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, one more.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much. I'm Shrey from Social Trade. We are an AI company. We simulate human behavior. We work with large retailers. I know you said you're still trying to find what you need to do, but AI is a very large space. You know, people kind of use the term AI, but there are so many different use cases and so many different ways in which a company could benefit. It's not all operational. It's not all predictive. So within your companies, have you got a dedicated team who is looking into these? Or is it like as part of a CMO, is it within your team that you're looking at, okay, how do we automate marketing insights, for example? How do we maybe use AI communities to get insights instead of agencies to iterate?
Yeah, we have a little bit of both. So we have a group who sort of owns the broader roadmap. So here's kind of in our pyramid, like a sort of efficiency is low-hanging fruit using ChatGPT, et cetera. Then we've got a sort of personal efficiency. Then we have operational, and then we have personalization, are sort of the tiers where we utilize AI. That group developed that structure and then has developed the roadmap. Here's what we're going to internalize. Here's what we're going to use agencies for. And then the teams are really required to move that forward, find the right partners or the right tools, and execute it themselves. So it's, to your point, a little bit dispersed, and I feel like not necessarily the best model for the future and for speed.
Yeah, I think just a quick, my company is powered by AI. So
We have it everywhere.
yeah, so it is like ingrained in absolutely everything we do. And now as we're setting up a marketing department, we're trying to understand, and again, like really looking at it blank slate. I'm trying to almost forget everything I've ever done to approach it differently and figure out what does that look like. And you know, we love frameworks and stuff. There aren't really any because it's all so new.
No, thank you. I'd love to
Thank
talk.
you.
New companies like me who are very innovative, we need a voice, and that's why I asked. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
We're going to take some of the conversations on the side, but thank you to Michelle and Melissa,
Yeah,
and thank you
thank
for
you.
everyone here.
No, not at all. The only thing I feel like is when I tell specific examples, they have to be a little bit like generic so that I'm not calling out someone. But otherwise, no. I think it brings out, because I'm so engaged, it like brings out even more examples.
I think, yes, a lot of examples, but I definitely flatten them out,
Right.
or don't talk about people or the situations in the same way that when I'm in that confessional talking about the study, it's a little different. Yeah.
So it was interesting because I was talking to Dom and he was saying, next year you'll do another study and sort of pitch something else. I'm like, there's so much depth in this one. How do you not continue it? And almost what we uncovered, which is it's important to know your profile, but how about diving deep into all the other profiles and understanding how does a chief meeting officer flex to a mutiny and what scenarios is that needed? How does a chief meeting officer flex? That's where the unlock is.
I agree. I think build the toolkit around it. Understand what you're natively leaning towards, and then how do you wear those other things? What does that look like? How do you push yourself out of your comfort zone?
Because we're never going to be in the same situation, right? We're not we're not always going to be required to be chief meeting officers. The value in the CMO is how we see change and how we can flex our capabilities, our marketing, our leadership to that change. I mean, we see it and we hopefully operate faster than everyone else. So me knowing all those different types and when I need to flex into those would be incredible. And I didn't unlock it till we were sitting there that, oh, right, I need to spend more time rereading those other types.
Yeah.
I didn't spend as much time on that.
Always goes back to the humans. Really enjoyed all of our conversations. It did make me think about myself. I liked the kind of digging into, as I thought about the questions and the different roles. It made me reflective, which I always enjoy too. So between those two things, it was great. Would definitely do it again.
Yeah, I absolutely would. I loved it. I think I said this. I enjoy the learning.
Yeah.
Anything that I feel like is content to make me a better leader, I just absolutely love. Learning about myself, tools, all of those things.
And this was so easy, right?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you had to do it again, would you have us? Because I wouldn't. I would have multiple profiles.
I agree too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we were amazing, but you would have 3 different profiles, right?
Yeah.
And kind of argue out.
Totally.
And give them the assignment. Like if you're telling AI what your role is today, your role is to like fight this out from this perspective and then show how you flex.
Right. And how would you each do it? Maybe that's what we'll talk about tonight. Like how would you each do it in these different scenarios? Yes.